It's so different listening to books than reading them. It takes a while getting used to. Hey princesses, how we doing? Let's not do that anymore. Let's never do that. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to continue on our Wimpy Kid journey. Specifically, we'll be talking about books 11 to 15. 11 to 15. The camera's mirrored, so I don't know which direction was correct. If you want to listen to my thoughts on the previous books or on the first 3 live action movies, you can watch the videos on my channel or in the dedicated playlist on my channel. Point is, go to my channel, please. As you guys know, I've been rereading these books by borrowing them from the library, but they don't have some of the books, so I have to listen to the audiobooks because that's the only copy that they have. I didn't want to do that initially because the illustrations are such a big part of the series and they're one of my favorite parts of the books too. But I thought, why not give it a chance? Why not try the audiobooks? Because it'll be interesting to compare between my experience of listening to the books rather than reading them, and it gives me more things to talk about, so it doesn't feel like I'm just repeating myself in these videos. Because let's be real, like as much as I like these books, there's only so much you can talk about them, especially when there are already about 20 books in the main series. I can't keep talking about how I feel the books are sometimes disjointed or how I don't think Greg is a sociopath. At some point, these books will kind of morph into more or less the same things because the formula is tried and true, so massive changes would not happen to the structure or the way that the books are written. But if I talk about the audiobooks, I might have a bit more things to say, so a portion of this video will be dedicated to me talking about the production of the audiobooks. Hopefully this will be interesting to you guys because I want this series to be a comprehensive retrospective, so that means covering as much aspect of the franchise as I can. I don't think a lot of people talk about the audiobooks as well on YouTube, so I hope that this will be a pretty fresh review and pretty fresh video analysis. Hopefully. Part 1, the production. Among these 5 books, I only listened to 3 audiobooks, whereas I read the other 2 books. One reason being I actually own one of these books, and the other reason being that the library has the other book as a book, not an audiobook. So I can speak a little bit about my experience, switching back and forth between these 2 formats. My thoughts about the audiobooks production is, I think they're really cute. I know Greg might not like the fact that I used the word cute, but I just find the production and the quality of the audiobooks to be fun and cute. Like, that's the best way I can describe it, okay? Cute is not derogatory, okay? It's a good word. For the first few ones I listened to, they're just straight up one person reading out the whole book. The reader is Dan Russell, by the way, and I didn't know this until I looked it up, but he voiced Richard from Gumball.
Fine, if you all insist.
He was always very loud. Very, very loud, because that was the only word I could do.
My world is colliding. I love Gumball so much. Anyway, Dan Russell pretty much read the book the whole way through in the earlier audiobooks. But in the subsequent books, they've added elements like sound effects and musical cues, and I think this is done to make up for the lack of illustrations. So the illustrations are described by the sound effects and musical cues and Dan Russell. It's a pretty creative way to make the audiobooks just as engaging and exciting as the books. In its entirety, I actually think the audiobooks manages to capture the silliness and chaos of the, readout books, the books. However, it does feel a bit frustrating sometimes when you're listening to Dan talk. Dan, like I'm his friend or something. I'm not. Like you're listening to Dan Russell read out a paragraph and then suddenly there's a sound effect or a music, and I admit I got jump scared a little bit. Out of all the things I can get scared by, it's the Wimpy Kid books. Because of that, for some of the books, like Wrecking Ball, where there's so much illustrations, the flow gets a bit clunky. Like Dan Russell is reading the story and then suddenly there's this sound effect and then he's reading again and then sound effect. It might not be as disruptive when you're reading the books, and there are a whole bunch of illustrations, but when you're listening to it, it's kind of like, it's like when someone tells a story and then there's this other person who just like jumping in and interrupting it to add their own little comments, so it interrupts the flow of the story. But all things considered, the production team did an awesome job with the audiobooks, and Dan Russell was really animated reading the books, and that that added a lot of energy as well. But I do miss the illustrations, especially because I'm a fan of Jeff Kinney as an artist, and I love, you know, the little art in the books. And being, you know, like I'm somewhat of an artist myself, I do miss the illustrations, particularly as someone who got into these books because, you know, it has illustrations. So, you know, I have an attachment to the illustrations in a way. Part 2, the books. The books we'll be discussing today are Double Down, released November 2016, The Getaway, published November 2017, The Meltdown, released October 2018, Wrecking Ball, published November 2019, and The Deep End, released October 2020. I'm drinking coconut water as well. When talking about these books, I want to specifically talk about Double Down. I don't particularly have any strong feelings over this book. I know on Reddit, a lot of people don't really like it. In fact, some people might hate it. Because I saw the bad reception for this book before I listened to it, I was sort of prepared to have a pretty bad experience with the book, but honestly, like, it wasn't that bad. It was just like mid. Something I and the Redditors noticed is that this book recycles some ideas from previous books. For example, there's this bit where Susan goes back to college in this book, and then there's this bit as well where the kids in Greg's class do book reports based on books from the same series. However, I don't think this is like an isolated incident that happens in Double Down. I also feel like this happens in the other subsequent books. While they're remixed a little bit, some jokes have similar punchlines to the jokes that, you know, happened in the previous books. For example, in The Getaway, Rodrick got left behind during a trip the same way that Susan was also left behind in another book. Overall, Double Down specifically had a lot of references to past events from past books. Like, a lot of recurring characters return, and there is explicit reference to the cheese touch. However, the references might be intentional. I found this quote on Wikipedia. In an interview, Kinney stated, "After the 10th book, Old School, I found myself at a crossroads in my career. I wasn't sure if I should continue writing Diary of a Wimpy Kid books or go down a different path. Double Down is really special to me because it reflects a renewed commitment to the series and a plan for the future." It's interesting that this book is called Double Down and Jeff Kinney is doubling down on his commitment to the series. I'm not Jeff Kinney, so I can't truly speak to this, but it feels like the references and callbacks were pretty deliberate. Maybe Jeff Kinney revisited some of the older books and he's like, oh my god, what a legacy I've created. And he can't help but sneak in references to his previous book as a reward for readers who stuck around after all these years. Because at this rate, I feel the readers who has read the Wimpy Kid book since the start, they've probably grown out of the series. Honestly, I feel like the last book that I read from the series is around probably like the 9th one. So it kind of tracks with my theory, I think. It's a theory though, don't come at me for it. But this is something that I want to highlight, right? With Jeff Kinney's renewed commitment to keep writing the Wimpy Kid books, the books will likely not have a definite end. As a result, I don't think readers are obligated to stick around or continue reading because you're not working towards an ending. You're not reading towards an ending. I think the life cycle for the readers of this series is the readers will discover the books, they will read them for a couple of years, then they will grow out of the books, and then they will stop reading. But given how accessible these books are, there will always be a batch of new readers coming in. And that's why I think the reason Jeff Kinney was putting these references in is maybe it's a goodbye to the previous batch of readers, because by the time Double Down came out, it would have been more than 10 years since Jeff Kinney officially dipped his toes into this world, if you include the original webcomics. And if you got onto the Wimpy Kid train around when the first novel was published, that would have been 2007, and Double Down was published 2016. So that would have been like 10 years. So that's a long time. Because of this, when I'm reading these new books, I've come to terms that, you know what, like, it's still going to be funny, but some jokes or concepts might get recycled, and there might not be too much character development because, as we mentioned and established in previous videos, the characters will just get reset in the following book, right? And between that and the fact that I've aged out of the target audience, I cannot criticize these books for not delivering something that I wanted. But it should be clear to me that the priority is not to appeal to people my age, but to another age group. And I have to accept that after reading 15 books from this series, Jeff Kinney's priority has never been about creating a character-driven book where you break down Greg, the people around him, and their relationships. He just wants to tell funny stories about a kid's middle school years and experiences. That's not to say that the books are terrible and I don't think they have any value, and I hope it doesn't come across this way because I still massively enjoyed them. I have a lot of love for this series. It's just I feel these subsequent books have similar problems to The Long Haul, where the plots and jokes were funny, but it was light on character development, and that's personally not something that I like. It's just personal taste. So I've made the agreement with myself that when I'm reading books 11 to 15, I should just enjoy the ride and read the books for what they are. Funny books with funny jokes and funny stories. Part 3. Enjoying the books for what they are. One of my fears coming into these books is that Jeff Kinney will start phoning it in, and I'm pleased to say that he didn't. The illustration in these books are much better. Like, I peeked into the actual books of the books that I listened to, and I did read the Getaway and the Deep End, and the illustrations are still great, if not better. They're more dynamic and detailed, so Jeff Kinney is definitely growing as an artist. Even if I don't think the books are this big character exploration books, there are still some character moments. For example, in the Getaway, Greg was prepared to apologize to his parents for doubting their idea about bringing the boys to a resort for Christmas. This was before the trip turned out really bad, by the way. The Heffley vacations are famously bad, okay? And then in Wrecking Ball, Greg was about to move to a different neighborhood, and when Rowley presented his parting gift to Greg got pretty choked up about it. When Greg didn't end up moving, his first thought was he was glad that he didn't have to be away from Rowley or he didn't have to make new friends. As much as you say all that, Greg, I know, I see you. I see what's going on. You actually miss Rowley. You like Rowley. You enjoy his company. But the biggest thing that I appreciate about these books is that Jeff Kinney tries to find new situations to put Greg into. So his stories doesn't only revolve around being in middle school, but also involve other new experiences. Wrecking Ball is especially fresh because I don't think there's any plot that resembles this plot from the previous books, because it's about the Heffleys wanting to renovate their home and the complications that come with home renovations. Even with the Getaway and the Deep End, Jeff Kinney really loves doing vacation books, by the way. But for these ones, he tries to find different kinds of vacations to focus on. The Getaway is about the Heffleys going to like a fancy resort, and the Deep End is about the Heffleys traveling in an RV. It's so common to see artists just repeating what they've done in previous installments and cash in. So I appreciate that Jeff Kinney finds creative ways to make the books feel fresh for returning readers. And if you're a new reader and you're looking to binge read this series, it won't get too boring because the stories are at least different enough to give you different reading experiences. Part 4, Greg Heffley, the Eternal Boy. I hear police sirens, but we'll continue on. Wrecking Ball is arguably my favorite from this bunch. Again, I feel like it's the most fresh because the premise is very different than the other books, and I still got a lot of good character moments from Greg too. And this is a selfish reason. I generally love architecture and interior design and anything about houses. I like randomly going on real estate websites and just browsing whatever is on there, even though I don't intend to buy a house. How can we afford that in this economy? And this is also why I have such like a toxic relationship with Selling Sunset, though I'm probably not gonna watch the new season because I hear it's very mean-spirited. Anyway, because of those reasons, I enjoyed this book massively to the point I am considering buying the book so I can own a copy because I just want it. I just want to have it. Another side tangent, in this book, there is an anecdote about Greg and Rowley trying to dig a hole to China, and in the Chinese translations of the books, there is a foreword from Jeff Kinney that they keep repeating for each book. In that foreword, Jeff Kinney talked about how when he was a kid, he tried digging a hole to China with his friends as well. So I just thought that that's a cute thing to put in. Anyway, there's another reason why I'm very attached to Wrecking Ball as well. Let me set the scene. The main premise of this book is that the Heffleys received a significant inheritance from a dead relative. The family argued about what to do with that money, but Susan suggested doing home renovations, particularly to the kitchen, because she's in the kitchen a lot, you know? However, there was a mix-up with the permits, and that prevented the Heffleys from finishing the renovations. Meanwhile, Greg and the whole school did badly on a test, and it reflects very badly on the quality of the school, and Susan got really annoyed by this. So Susan had the idea to move the whole family to another school district. Greg was pretty on board with the idea of having a new slate and moving to a new neighborhood. For a second, I thought it would be so interesting to have the Heffleys move, because it could start very interesting character development with the characters, not only Greg, but also from like Frank, Susan, Rodrick, and Manny. And in a way, you can get the best of both worlds, where you get to welcome a new batch of readers while still retaining the old one. It's like the status quo would have been changed with the move, so old readers can read fresh new stories about Greg in a new middle school. Meanwhile, with Greg navigating this new environment and middle school, the books will still be accessible enough for new readers, because it's about, you know, school. What I'm trying to say is, I guess this can be like a soft reboot. I don't know what you think, but I thought it might be a good idea to just kind of take the franchise to a different direction, but alas, it wasn't in the cards. At the end of the book, the Heffleys still remain in the same neighborhood. But I really like the idea of the moving, because the moving idea was kind of towards the end of the book, and there were only a couple of pages before the Heffleys actually move, and I was like, oh, is Jeff Kinney actually doing this? But, you know, he ended up not doing it. I actually understand why he didn't do it, but I also feel like, you know, Jeff Kinney does his best to create new situations to put Greg into, but there's only so much he can do. Like, what can a middle schooler go through? I don't know. I mean, after like reading 15 of these books, and after almost like 15 years of writing these books, and Jeff Kinney still does more or less the same thing, yeah, I just don't think we can expect any massive changes that will shake and reform the Wimpy Kid canon. Because when you think about it, like, the opportunity presented itself, right, in the Wrecking Ball book, and Jeff Kinney didn't take it. So I think more than anything, this kind of shows that Jeff Kinney has the commitment to keep Greg in the same status quo as much as he can. In Double Down, Greg talked about this book series called Spine Tinglers. They are very clearly a spoof of the Goosebumps book series. Because of this reference, I can't help but compare Wimpy Kid and Goosebumps as series. They're both children's book series that are still being published despite the many years. And like Wimpy Kid, Goosebumps also have a particular formula and structure that hasn't really changed after all these years. Or maybe it has. Goosebump enthusiasts, can you let me know in the comments? Anyhow, the same way that Goosebumps continue to be published after all of these years, I think Jeff Kinney will continue publishing the Wimpy Kid books as well, sticking to the formula and the structure that he has done so well. But we can only hope that he finds other creative stories to put Greg into. Alas, guys, Greg will eternally be a middle schooler, and he will remain that way. You know what? Like, it's not a bad thing. Like, the existence of these books did not interrupt my life whatsoever. I grew out of them, and I can still read them, but to expect like an A24 Bildungsroman with great character development from these books is to be misguided. I'll just enjoy them for what they are. Funny books for children with funny jokes and funny stories. But what do you guys think? Do you like the hand movement? It's like, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? From these books, which one's your favorite? I guess from the way that I keep talking about Wrecking Ball in this video, you guys will know that one's my favorite. But I would love to know what's your favorite. Like, leave your comments below and we can talk about it. Anyway, if you like this video, please consider liking it, commenting on it, sharing it, just engage with it overall, please. I work so hard on these videos. And consider subscribing to the channel too if you want more Wimpy Kid videos, or if you want video essays and analysis of media and pop culture, because I also do that too. You can watch the playlist and the other videos on my channel. Again, visit my channel, guys. Look at it. Browse around a little bit. You might find interesting things that you like, and maybe you'll subscribe. But apart from that, thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys have a good day, a good morning, a good evening, a good afternoon, a good night whenever you are watching this video. Bye.